everyone, and thank you for coming. I would also like to thank North Mankato Library for giving me this opportunity. My name is Dr. Múmbi Múgambi, and this presentation is drawn from my memoir, Echo of My Father's Voice. It is a personal journey that connects family memory, African history, and identity across continents. I was born and raised in Kenya, on the slopes of Mount Kenya, in a culture deeply shaped by oral storytelling. Within my family, there were recurring narratives about origins that extended beyond East Africa. Elders often spoke about ancestral links to regions such as Israel and Abyssinia. These were not presented as academic claims, but as lived memories passed through generations. As I grew older, I became interested in understanding how these oral traditions intersect with documented history. That curiosity led me into deeper study of both African history and colonial records. To understand Kenya's historical context, we must begin with European contact. British missionaries arrived in Kenya in 1844, and by 1884 to 1885, the Berlin Conference formalized the partition of Africa among European powers. African communities were not part of these negotiations. Kenya became a British colony in 1895, and colonial rule introduced profound structural changes: land alienation, forced labor system, taxations, and the erosion of indigenous government or governance structures. Among the most affected communities were the Kikuyu community, which I come from, whose ancestral lands were extensively appropriated. This disruption altered social structures, cultural systems, and economic independence. Resistance to colonial rule culminated in the Mau Mau uprising. I'm sure most of them have never heard about this. This movement was rooted in demands for land restitution, freedom, known in Kikuyu as Wiadhi, and protection of sacred cultural and spiritual spaces. The colonial government declared a state of emergency in 1952, resulting in mass detentions and the establishment of camps that held Kikuyu, Embu, and Meru populations under harsh conditions. Scholars such as Caroline Elkins have documented the scale of violence. My early curiosity extended in cultural and linguistic comparisons. I began to observe similarities between Kikuyu traditions and other ancient systems, and what I read in the Bible, including calendar structures based on lunar cycles, seasonal timing, and cyclical interpretations of time. In both systems, time is not purely linear, but connected to agricultural, spiritual, and community rhythms. These reflections do not provide definitive answers, but they opened space for inquiry into how cultures preserve memory and meaning. Then I migrated to the United States. My migration to the United States marked a new phase in the exploration. In Alabama, I experienced my first encounter with racial classification in America, being identified as Black within a specific historical framework. Later in Minnesota, I was frequently mistaken for Ethiopian, which further highlighted the complexity of African identity within the diaspora. These experiences motivated me to study identity formation more deeply through historical texts, oral traditions, and comparative research. In my work, I also engaged with biblical and historical references, including Zephaniah 3, chapter 10, for example, and interpretations within Jewish textual traditions, such as the Talmud, which references the dispersal of groups across regions, including Africa. These texts were interpreted in multiple ways, contributed to broader questions about migration, memory, and identity across civilizations. Additionally, I examined scholarly work on some groups, other Bantu groups, like the Lemba people of Southern Africa, whose oral traditions claim Middle Eastern origin. Genetic studies have identified the Y chromosome markers, including the Cohen model haplotype, in some Lemba population, aligning with aspects of their oral history. Similar traditions, like the Igbo in Nigeria and other African communities that preserve narratives of migration and origin. To deepen this exploration, I also conducted personal DNA ancestry testing, which revealed complex migration patterns and connections across Africa. These results were not used to define identity as a fixed way, but rather to expand understanding of human movement and interconnectedness. A central moment in this journey was my conversation with my father. His voice, recorded and preserved in the memoir, represents the transmission of memory across generations and importance of oral history in understanding identity. The purpose of this work is not to establish exclusivity or superiority, but to preserve oral histories, engage with historical narrative critically, and encourage dialogue among identity, migration, and memory. It is rooted in the belief that all people deserve dignity, respect, and safety. As expressed in the Bible, in Micah 4:4, a vision is presented of peace, where individuals live securely within their own spaces, without fear. This presentation invites reflection on how history is constructed, how identity is formed, and how personal and collective narratives intersect. Thank you for subscribing to my channel, and thank you, my friends, for liking and sharing. Please continue walking with me in this journey of identity, rewriting history, asking ourselves about things that we've always been told, challenging the norms and questioning everything that we've ever been told. In the next section of the video, we will continue with this conversation. Again, I thank Mankato Taylor Library for giving this opportunity to tell my story. I do not take it for granted that a girl who came from Kenya, who grew up on the slopes of Mount Kenya, is here to tell the world this story. Our story that was never written in history books. And we are telling it now. It's not a Kenyan story. It's not a Kikuyu story. It's an African story. Thank you, and please tune in to listen to the next video.